All right, so picture this. A wildfire just ripping through a neighborhood, leaving destruction everywhere. But then you see it. One house, standing tall, untouched. You'd think that's impossible, right? Well, today we're diving into a report called California Homes and Fire Risk, and they say maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to be that way.
It's a pretty amazing idea, and this report really digs into why this is even a problem. Like, what are we using to actually build our homes?
And you know what? I was actually shocked to see how much we rely on wood here in the US. 93% of single family homes. And 70% of new multifamily buildings are all wood framed. But in Europe, it's totally different. Places like France and Germany, they don't use wood nearly as much.
Yeah, that difference is definitely interesting. I mean, historically, wood was everywhere in the U.S., cheap and easy, so it became like the automatic choice. But this report, it's like, hold on, are we even considering the real cost of using all this wood?
Yeah, and they're not just talking about, like, the price of lumber. This report breaks down the financial hit from fire damage. Are you ready for this? It was a massive $14.8 billion in 2019 alone.
And that's not even counting the environment. This report makes a direct link between chopping down forests for wood and what it does to the planet. Fewer trees mean less carbon being absorbed, plus all the carbon stored in those trees gets released back into the air. Double whammy.
So we're basically building with something that goes up in flames super easily, and then we end up paying for it in all these ways. But this report doesn't just leave us hanging, right? They give us a possible way out.
Yeah, they introduced something called MHS building systems, and their big idea is using aluminum framing instead of wood.
Now, let's be real. When most people think aluminum, they're picturing like those boring office buildings or maybe even just flimsy foil, right? But this report goes way beyond that. They show all these MHS homes that actually look amazing. It's like proving that you don't have to sacrifice style for safety.
Exactly. It's about changing how we see aluminum. It's not wood. It won't just burst into flames. Aluminum can take the heat without falling apart, making it a much safer bet, especially in places where wildfires are a threat.
And that ability to withstand a fire, that's key. This report keeps talking about reusability, and it makes you think, like, what if a fire tears through a neighborhood, but the homes built with aluminum are still standing? Less waste, less rebuilding from scratch, less strain on resources that are already stretched thin.
Total opposite of what happens with wood, which often just turns to ash. Then you got to start from zero. This whole reusability thing, it could be a game changer, especially with these intense wildfires happening more often.
And it ties into that whole sustainability thing that's getting bigger and bigger. You can recycle aluminum completely, like 100%. The report dives into this idea of a circular economy in construction where we keep reusing materials instead of tossing them out.
Yeah, it's a big step toward cutting down on waste and making the building industry greener. And something else that really caught my eye was how in-depth they went into fireproof structural insulated panels, or, FSIPs for short. They're a big part of these MHS systems.
Yeah, this sounds super high tech. The report says they basically create a fire-resistant shell around the whole building. What makes them so different from regular insulated panels?
Well, with FSEs, the stuff in the middle, the core, it's not flammable at all. It's totally different from those typical panels that have flammable foam insulation. Think of it like a shield that stops fire from easily spreading between the walls and floors. Adding that extra protection could mean the difference between like minor damage and your entire house being gone.
So it's not just about the framing. It's like a whole house approach to making sure it can withstand a fire. And from what I'm seeing, these MHS systems, they don't stop there. They go beyond just the framing and panels and make sure even the exterior is designed to be fire resistant.
Exactly. They focus on using materials on the outside that don't burn, like fiber cement siding and metal roofing, even fire-resistant windows. It's almost like you're building a fortress against fire, making sure there are as few weak spots as possible.
It all sounds pretty impressive, but the question that pops into my mind is, like, what about the cost? Isn't aluminum way more expensive than wood? I bet a lot of people are wondering the same thing.
Yeah, that's what a lot of folks think. And the report knows that, like, right off the bat, the upfront costs for those MHS systems might be a bit higher. But here's where it gets interesting.
So it's not just about that initial price tag.
Right. This report goes deep into the money side of things. They say that when you look at the long game, over the entire life of the building, the cost difference between wood and these MHS systems might not even be that much.
Okay, how does that work? Something that costs like twice as much at the beginning can end up costing about the same over time.
They break it down. First, those FSEs we talked about. They're not just fire resistant, they're also incredible insulators. That means you're spending less on heating and cooling, which adds up to some big savings over time.
So the energy efficiency helps make up for that higher starting price. What else?
They also talk about how tough and long-lasting aluminum is. Unlike wood, which can rot, get eaten by termites, or get messed up by water, aluminum can handle all that. So you're not spending as much on repairs and upkeep over the years.
It's like buying, say, a really good appliance. It might cost more upfront, but it lasts longer and doesn't break down as easily, so you save money in the end.
Exactly. And then there's the biggest thing of all. If a fire happens, are you prepared to rebuild your entire house? With an MHS home, you might not have to. That alone could make up for any extra cost you had at the beginning.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But even if the money part works out, some people might still be stuck on how it looks. Can you really get that same cozy, homey feeling with aluminum that you get with wood?
That's another thing people assume, and the report addresses it straight on. They show all these examples of MHS homes that are just beautiful. They fit in perfectly with different styles of architecture.
So it's not just those cold, like factory-looking buildings.
Not even close. Aluminum is super adaptable. You can shape it, mold it, and finish it in tons of ways to get all sorts of looks, like exposed beams, intricate details, even finishes that make it look like warm wood. The report highlights how architects and designers are actually getting really excited about aluminum. It's a modern material, and they're using it to be creative while also making sure the building is safe from fire.
So it's not just about what it does, it's about the possibilities for design, too.
Exactly. And don't forget about the good it does for the environment. We mentioned the whole recycling thing, but this report goes even deeper. They compare how much carbon is released when you make aluminum versus when you cut down and process wood.
Now that you mention it, isn't it really energy intensive to make aluminum?
Yeah, but the report shows some data that's pretty interesting. When you think about the whole life cycle of aluminum, from making it to using it to what happens when you're done with it, the impact on the environment can actually be less than wood, especially when you consider things like deforestation and all the energy it takes to move lumber around.
So it's not as easy as saying one is better than the other. You got to look at the whole picture from start to finish.
Totally. And the report even talks about how recycled aluminum is being used more and more in construction, which makes the environmental impact even less. Their vision is for buildings that are made of stuff we can just keep using and reusing, so we're not wasting resources or trashing the planet.
It's a pretty compelling vision, but let's be real, even with all these benefits, there are going to be some hurdles to getting everyone on board with MHS systems. I mean, the construction industry isn't exactly known for embracing change quickly, right?
You're not wrong. It's not just about getting homeowners to see the benefits. It's about shifting an entire industry that's so used to doing things the traditional way.
So where do they see the biggest roadblocks?
The report points out a few key challenges. One is just plain old lack of awareness. A lot of builders and architects are so used to working with wood that they might be hesitant to try something new, even if it has clear advantages.
So it's about educating people and showing them that there's a better way to build.
Exactly. And then there's the training side of things. Working with aluminum is different from working with wood. It requires different skills. This report stresses that we need training programs to give builders the know-how to work with these MHS buildings effectively.
Okay, so there are some logistical things to figure out. What else?
Another issue is getting the materials and having enough skilled workers. Aluminum is produced all over, but the specific types and parts needed for these MHS systems might not be easy to find everywhere.
So there are supply chain issues to consider too.
Right. And then there's the whole thing about building codes. A lot of the codes we have now are written with traditional wood framing in mind. They might not really cover the unique aspects of building with aluminum.
So we might need to update those regulations and standards to reflect these new technologies.
For sure. The report calls for a team effort. They say industry experts, people who make policy, and building code officials need to work together to make sure those codes are up to date and reflect the latest and greatest in fire-resistant construction.
That sounds like a lot to tackle, but this report seems to be pretty optimistic that we can overcome these challenges.
Yeah, they are. They emphasize that this isn't like a flip-the-switch overnight change. It's going to take time, education, and people working together to move the whole industry toward a more sustainable and fire-resistant way of building.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about people, policies, and systems all evolving together.
That's it. It's a holistic view. Building a safer, more sustainable future means we've got to look at all these pieces.
Now, with all this talk about MHS systems, it might sound like they're just some idea that's never been tested. But the report actually gives some really cool, real world examples of them in action.
Yeah, they do. They highlight a bunch of case studies where MHS systems have actually been used to build homes and commercial buildings in areas that are prone to wildfires.
Okay, let's get into those. What kind of projects did they talk about?
One that really stood out was this community in California that got hit hard by wildfires a few years back. They decided to rebuild using MHS systems. And you know what? When another fire swept through, the homes built with aluminum framing were still standing, while a lot of those traditional wood-framed homes were destroyed.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful example of how these systems can actually work in real life. It's one thing to talk about the theory, but to see it protect those homes during an actual fire, that must have been a huge relief for those homeowners.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just like fancy custom homes either. The report mentions a project where they used MHS systems to build more affordable housing in a zone with high fire risk. So it's not just a luxury thing. It could be used to make sure everyone has access to safer housing.
That's really good to hear. What other examples did they share?
They highlight projects using MHS systems for commercial buildings, schools, even government buildings. One that was particularly interesting was a school built with MHS that was right in a wildfire-prone area. When a wildfire came close, the building was actually able to act as a safe place for the whole community, protecting hundreds of people from the fire because of how it was built.
So it's not just about keeping individual homes safe, it's about building entire communities that can withstand these disasters.
Exactly. And these projects aren't just about fire resistance either. They're also doing really well in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability. They're minimizing their environmental impact and saving money on operating costs.
Sounds like a win-win all around.
Exactly. These real-world examples show that MHS systems are a real and effective solution. It's not just theory, it's actually working.
It's inspiring to see these ideas being put into practice and making a real difference. But I'm sure there are still people out there who aren't convinced.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's on the fence about making the switch to aluminum construction?
I'd say don't be afraid to look beyond what you're used to and think about the bigger picture. The choices we make about how we build have long-term consequences. We're dealing with some pretty serious challenges: wildfires, climate change, running out of resources. Sticking with the old ways just isn't going to cut it.
It's about being open to new ideas, to finding better ways of doing things, and to creating a future where our buildings are safer, more sustainable, and can withstand whatever comes their way.
Totally agree. And this report makes it clear that this isn't just about California or places where wildfires happen a lot. The ideas of sustainability, resilience, and fire resistance are important everywhere.
So even if you're not living in a wildfire zone, these are still conversations worth having. We need to start thinking differently about the materials we use, how we design our buildings, and the impact our choices have on the planet as a whole.
It's a call to action for all of us: architects, builders, people who make policy, and just everyday people. We all play a part in shaping what our built environment looks like.
And that's where the report goes next, into the specific policy changes that could really help accelerate the adoption of these sustainable and fire-resistant building practices.
They don't shy away from the political side of things. They know there's going to be resistance from some industries and groups that benefit from keeping things the way they are.
But they make the case that doing nothing is actually the most expensive and risky option. They say we need strong leadership to move us toward a future where we're better prepared for these challenges.
Let's explore those policy recommendations in more detail after a quick break.
Okay, so we've laid out why these policy changes are so important, especially with wildfires becoming more frequent and intense. But I'm curious about the specifics. What exactly are they suggesting?
The report gets down to brass tacks. They propose a multi-pronged approach, starting with financial incentives. They suggest tax breaks for builders who opt for fire-resistant materials like aluminum or steel framing. And they propose similar incentives for homeowners who choose fire-resistant roofs, siding, and those advanced insulated panels we discussed earlier.
That's smart, using the tax code to encourage people to make safer choices. What other tools do they recommend using?
They delve into building codes. It might sound boring, but it's crucial. They argue that current codes, often based on old assumptions about wood framing, need a complete overhaul to address modern materials and the realities of wildfire risk.
So they're not just suggesting a few tweaks, they're talking about rethinking what safe construction means from the ground up.
Right. They propose stricter standards for fire resistance. especially in high-risk areas. Things like requiring non-combustible materials in specific areas or mandating a minimum level of fireproofing for exterior walls and roofs.
Those are some significant changes. I can imagine pushback from the construction industry.
And that's where their next recommendation comes in. Education and training. They suggest government-funded programs to teach builders and architects about the benefits and techniques of fire-resistant construction. They even talk about partnering with trade schools to incorporate these skills into their curriculum, ensuring future builders are knowledgeable about these new methods.
So it's about working with the industry, providing the support and resources to adapt. What about homeowners? Where do they fit in?
The report emphasizes the importance of providing clear and easy-to-understand information for consumers. They propose public awareness campaigns highlighting the risks of traditional construction and the benefits of fire-resistant options. They even suggest requiring home sellers to disclose a property's fire risk, like we do with lead paint or asbestos.
Empowering homeowners with knowledge to make informed decisions. It sounds like a comprehensive strategy, addressing the issue from all angles. But is it realistic? Given all the complexities of government and the influence of various interest groups, can these policies actually be implemented?
That's the big question. The report acknowledges potential roadblocks. They point out that certain industries, like the lumber industry, might resist these changes, arguing about increased costs or stifled innovation.
And there's the challenge of getting legislation passed, navigating the political landscape, and ensuring effective implementation.
Absolutely. But the report argues that the cost of doing nothing is far greater. They highlight the billions spent on wildfire suppression and recovery, the devastating loss of life and property, the disruption to communities and ecosystems. It's a matter of public safety and long-term economic security, not just an environmental concern.
So these policies aren't just about being green, they're about protecting people and ensuring a stable future.
Precisely. And they emphasize a sense of urgency, arguing that incremental change is not enough. The risks are too high, the consequences too severe. They call on readers to advocate for change, to contact their elected officials, to support organizations pushing for these policies, and to demand better from our leaders.
That's a strong message. So they're not just offering a plan, they're calling for a movement.
Exactly. They envision widespread public support, compelling lawmakers to prioritize fire-resistant construction and build a safer future for everyone.
Okay, so we've outlined the problem, explored potential solutions, and even discussed policy changes to implement those solutions. Let's step back and consider what this means for our listeners. What can they do right now to make a difference?
The report offers some concrete steps. First, educate yourself. Understand the risks associated with traditional construction in your area and explore fire-resistant alternatives. Talk to your builder or architect about these options, even if you're not in a high-risk zone. Increased demand for these materials and methods will make them more available and affordable.
So it's about leveraging consumer power to drive change. What else can people do?
Become an advocate. Let your elected officials know that fire-resistant construction is important to you. Support organizations working to advance these policies. Share this information with your friends and family. Spark conversations in your community.
Raising awareness, making some noise, pushing for change from the ground up.
Precisely. And making informed decisions as homeowners. If you're building or buying a home, consider fire-resistant materials and design features. Think long-term, not just about the initial price.
It's about understanding that these choices aren't just personal, they have consequences for our communities and the planet.
Taking responsibility for the future, one building at a time.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. We've uncovered the risks of wood construction, explored the potential of MHS systems, and discussed policy changes that could reshape our built environment.
We've challenged assumptions, sparked debate, and hopefully encouraged you to think differently about how we build.
If the complexity of this issue feels a bit overwhelming, you're not alone. It's a challenging topic, but the report offers hope. It demonstrates that we have the knowledge, technology, and the potential to create a safer, more sustainable, and fire-resistant future.
A future worth striving for. And as the report eloquently reminds us, the time to act is now.
So listeners, what will you do? Will you stand by as wildfires continue to wreak havoc, or will you join the movement for change?
It's your choice. But remember, the future isn't something that just happens. It's something we build together.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity, ignited your imagination, and empowered you to make a difference.
Until next time, stay curious, keep the conversations going, and keep the flames of change burning bright.
Stay safe out there, deep divers. All right, so we've talked about why these policy changes are so important, especially with wildfires becoming, well, more frequent and intense. But I'm kind of curious about the how. Like, what are they actually proposing?
Yeah, the report gets into the nitty-gritty. They outline a multi-pronged approach, starting with those financial incentives we touched on.
Hmm.
They suggest tax breaks for builders, to encourage them to use fire-resistant materials like aluminum, steel framing, that sort of thing. And they propose similar incentives for homeowners, too. So, like, if you choose a fire-resistant roof or siding or those high-tech insulated panels, you might get a tax break.
Makes sense using those tax codes to kind of nudge people towards safer choices, right? What else are they suggesting?
They get into building codes. It might seem kind of dry, but it's actually super important. A lot of the codes we have now are based on old ideas about wood framing. The report argues that we need a serious overhaul, like a total rethink, to deal with new materials and the reality of wildfire risk these days.
So, more than just a few updates, they're saying we need to redefine what safe construction even means.
Exactly. They're proposing stricter standards for fire resistance, especially in those high-risk zones. Things like maybe making it mandatory to use non-combustible materials in certain areas or requiring a minimum level of fireproofing for those exterior walls and roofs.
Those are some pretty big changes. I can imagine some pushback from the construction industry.
Oh, for sure. And that's where their next recommendation comes in education and training. They suggest, like, government-funded programs to teach builders and architects about fire-resistant construction. The benefits, the techniques, that sort of thing. They even suggest working with trade schools to incorporate these skills into their curriculum. That way, the next generation of builders will be up to speed on these new methods.
So, meeting the industry halfway, giving them support to adapt, I like it. What about the average homeowner, though? What can they do?
Well, the report really emphasizes making sure consumers have clear, easy-to-understand information. They propose those public awareness campaigns, highlighting the risks of traditional construction and the benefits of going fire-resistant. And get this, they even suggest that home sellers should have to disclose a property's fire risk, kind of like how we already disclose stuff like lead paint or asbestos.
Wow. So, giving homeowners the knowledge to make good choices, it sounds like a pretty comprehensive plan attacking this problem from all sides. But is it actually doable? I mean, with how complex governments can be and all the different interest groups, can these policies really get implemented?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And the report acknowledges those potential roadblocks. They point out that certain industries, like think lumber, they might push back against these changes. They'll argue about costs going up or that innovation will be stifled.
Right. Plus, there's always that hurdle of getting any legislation passed, navigating the political maze, and making sure these policies actually work as intended once they're in place.
You got it. But the report argues that doing nothing will cost us even more in the long run. They talk about the billions and billions of dollars spent fighting wildfires and cleaning up afterward, not to mention the horrible loss of life, homes destroyed, and the disruption to entire communities and ecosystems. They frame it as a public safety issue and a matter of long-term economic security, not just an environmental thing.
So it's not just about going green, it's about protecting people and making sure we have a stable future.
Exactly. And they really stress the urgency of this. They're saying that baby steps aren't enough anymore. The stakes are too high, the potential consequences too disastrous to settle for half measures. They're calling on everyone to become advocates, to contact their elected officials, support organizations pushing for these policies, and demand better from our leaders.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful call to action. It sounds like they're not just offering a roadmap, they're calling for a full-blown movement.
That's right. They see widespread public support as the key to pushing lawmakers to prioritize fire-resistant construction and create a safer future for everyone.
So we've broken down the problem, we've explored possible solutions, we've even gotten into the policy changes needed to make it all happen. But I think it's important to step back and ask, what does this all mean for our listeners? What can they do, like right now, to make a difference?
Well, the report has some practical advice. First, educate yourself. Learn about the risks where you live. Research those fire-resistant alternatives. Even if you aren't in a high-risk area, talk to your builder or architect about these options. The more people demand these materials and methods, the more readily available and affordable they'll become.
So we can use our buying power to push for change. What else?
Become an advocate. Reach out to your elected officials. Let them know that fire-resistant construction matters to you. Support organizations working on this stuff. Talk to your friends and family about it. Start those conversations in your community.
Raising awareness, making some noise. It's about pushing for change from the ground up.
You got it.
Yeah.
And making those informed choices when you're a homeowner. If you're building or buying, prioritize fire-resistant materials and design features. Think about the long-term costs and benefits.
It's bigger than just personal preference. These choices affect our communities and the planet.
It's about taking ownership of the future we're creating, one building at a time.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We've uncovered the hidden dangers of wood construction, explored the innovative potential of those MHS systems, and dug into the policy changes that could truly transform how we build.
We've challenged those old assumptions, we've sparked some debate, and hopefully you're thinking about building in a whole new way.
I know it's complex, it can feel kind of overwhelming, but this report does offer some hope. It shows that we have the knowledge, the tech, and the potential to build a safer, more sustainable, fire-resistant future.
It's a future worth fighting for, and as this report reminds us, there's no time to waste.
So what will you do? Will you watch as wildfires keep doing their damage, or will you be a part of this change?
It's up to you. Remember, the future isn't just handed to us. We build it together.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope we've sparked your curiosity, got your imaginations going, and given you the tools to make a difference.
Until next time, stay curious, keep those conversations going, and keep that fire for change burning bright.
Stay safe out there, deep divers.